welcome to Locker Talk, episode 54. The show everything WWE, past, present, and future. That is the main event, Matt. And you can call me Brother Nero. Not really, please don't call me Brother Nero, but if he gets to be Matt, I have to be somebody. So, this is the 54th episode of Locker Talk, and we are here to bring you all of our thoughts on the recent crossover between WWE and all of professional wrestling, really, and MMA and UFC. As you all know, UFC 200 was this past week, and I'm sure all three of you who watched this show, I'm sure at least one-third of you watched that show, and I'm meaning Andy. Brock Lesnar was there, and so we're just here to kind of give you our thoughts on the comparison between professional wrestling and MMA, because there's obviously a lot of similarities, a lot of differences of two very polarizing sports, and whose fans have very strong opinions, both for and against each other. But first, we're going to talk about the final deletion, as I sort of referenced just a little bit ago. I know normally we do WWE stuff, but I think this is noteworthy enough that we can talk about it. And so, Matt, why don't you give us your thoughts on the final deletion between Matt Hardy, Broken Matt Hardy, and Jeff Brother Nero Hardy? What did you think of this? I know you're huge Hardy fans. You've been big Hardy fans your whole life. So what did you think about this?
Yeah, the Hardys were actually what really drew me into watching wrestling with their performances. But it was very, very strange. If I'm talking from a purely wrestling standpoint, it's probably the worst match I've ever seen in my life. There were very few wrestling moves, even maybe 4 total wrestling moves even in the whole thing. Most of it was just stiff jabs. Jeff with 2 extreme moments, arguably 2. One off the fake tree. Could have been a real tree. It sounded like a real tree. And then, obviously, when, I don't know what it was like a cross, went up in flames. He kind of slipped off of it and fell down. It was kind of extreme. But it was just bad. They looked like they were having a lot of fun filming it, which is good. TNA gave them the green light to just do your storyline, whatever, and it actually, if I'm remembering correctly, just bumped their ratings way up, because people want to see what's going on. People want to see the freak show, I guess, that is the final deletion, lack of a better term.
Yeah, I think they got somewhere around the lines of 440,000 people watching it, which isn't a whole heck of a lot, but for TNA, that's quite a significant amount. I think they normally get somewhere around 300,000 or 320,000, somewhere in that ballpark. But yeah, I think when you're talking about this match, and I find this match really hard to talk about, it's at how you look at it. Like you said, if we're looking at it from a wrestling match standpoint, absolutely horrible, horrendous. It wasn't even a full, complete wrestling match. It was just little cuts and bits in between. But, I mean, I have to applaud TNA for even trying something this outlandish and this crazy with Brother Nero and Senior Benjamin and whatever the heck Matt Hardy's wife and child's name are, involving them for some reason. But, I mean, I have to applaud them for trying. It was definitely unique. It was definitely interesting. It got people intrigued. It got people talking about TNA, and it got people talking about the Hardys. So you have to applaud them for that. Honestly, you mentioned it. One of the things that I was thinking about for most of the quote-unquote match was whether or not that tree was real or not. Because I thought, it looks like a real tree, but then when they kind of got closer, the leaves didn't look right, and the bark didn't quite look right, and you know me, I know my trees pretty well. And I don't know, that bugged me a little bit. It probably shouldn't have, but that bump that Jeff took from that missed swanton and his side hit that ladder, you could see the big giant welt that it left immediately after. And yeah, it was an interesting story. Um, it was funny. I watched RTM Wrestling on Twitter, on YouTube, iTunes, rtmwrestling.com, all their fun, nice stuff. They did Andy did a educating Andy video about this, and his big gripe was that the acting was extremely bad in it. Yes, it was, and the accent was extremely bad. I don't think I can really forgive the bad acting. That's on them. But to me, the accent was so bad, just absolutely so horrendous that there's no way that he could have, like, that could have been him legitimately trying to have an accent. It just seems like it has to be a bad, like, it being bad on purpose. Maybe I'm giving Matt Hardy too much credit, but I don't know how you can have an accent be that bad and it not be on purpose. But
His hair was also pretty terrible.
The hair, don't get. I don't even know. But honestly, it had me intrigued. The whole false finish with Senor Benjamin, I thought that was a cool spot. But yeah, it was bad, but I don't think it was quite bad enough for it to be one of those things where it's so bad that it's good. But yeah, once again, it's just really hard for me to talk about this just because there's so many. It's just so out there that it's really hard to discuss. But I give them credit. They tried something new, and it seems to have paid off for them in interest. So have to give them that. Matt, is there anything else you have on this subject?
No, I liked the appearance of Willow though.
I had no clue who that was. Like, I knew it was Jeff Hardy. I did not know it was his alternate persona or whatever. But that's that. Let's get to the meat and potatoes of the show, because who doesn't love meat and potatoes, you dirty, dirty vegans? So, MMA, mixed martial arts, and professional wrestling. So I think we should start this off in saying that obviously, if you're watching this show, you know that Matt and myself are big professional wrestling fans. That's why we do the show. That's why we have the Twitter. That's why you three are watching this, because you either like wrestling or you like hearing us talk about wrestling for some reason. But neither of us are really big fans of MMA and UFC. I mean, I'm sure between the both of us, we've probably only seen a handful of fights in our life. So we're just kind of go through a few different topics, comparing the two, trying to give our biased, unbiased opinions, because let's be honest, there's no such thing as an unbiased opinion. And so just a fair warning, if you don't agree with us, that's okay. We like that. We like hearing different people's opinions. So if you want to leave a comment right down below on the old YouTube, tell us your thoughts, thoughts on our thoughts on WWE and professional wrestling, your thoughts on UFC and MMA. So Matt, why don't you just start off, just give your general opinions on what you think of MMA, because we know what you think about wrestling, you love it. What do you think about mixed martial arts?
The idea is exciting. Just like putting two fighters in a ring, it's very Roman-esque. It confuses me a little bit, MMA, because I don't know what, why those two are fighting. You know, with the WWE, you know why they're fighting. You have the storyline. You're like, this guy hates this guy because this happened, and you know, that's that. In MMA, it's like these two guys just don't like each other. You know, they just don't like each other. I don't follow it that much, so I'm also confused about how people get like title fights, but I'm assuming if I watch it regularly, that would just come with ease. But it's exciting. It's growing. It was just sold for $4 billion, so who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that I dislike MMA. If I'm ever if I'm ever someone's watching a UFC fighter thing, I will watch it and probably enjoy it. But it's just never one of those things that I really got into. I think there's a lot of positives that come with it, and I also think there's a lot of negatives. I think it's hard to become an MMA fan because, like you said, with wrestlers in wrestling, there's a story behind it to get you invested. Just getting into MMA, if you don't know the story behind it or why people are fighting, it's hard to get invested. And at the same time, I think, who doesn't love seeing two big guys or small guys, any guys, girls, just go in and beat the crap out of each other? That's one of the most popular sporting events, like you said, back in Roman times. In the Colosseum, that was fighting to the death. Thankfully, we've evolved a little bit into not fighting to the death. But it's always been something that's intriguing to humans. I love watching a good knockout punch. Who doesn't love that? Submissions are good. But at the same time, when you've got two guys circling each other and kind of feeling each other out for half the match, it's not very exciting. There's, not really a whole lot to be invested in there. And so just once again, Matt and I, neither of us are really big MMA fans. And so our thoughts and opinions are going to be a little bit biased towards professional wrestling. And so I wanted to get the opinion of someone who likes MMA, who likes the UFC, and knows a little bit about it. So I contacted our good friend Andy from @RTM Wrestling. Make sure you follow him. And Emma on Twitter. They have a lovely, amazing wrestling podcast that they do each and every week. I don't know how they do so many shows and keep up. I find it hard to keep up with watching them, let alone them doing them. And so I kind of asked what their overall thoughts on wrestling and MMA are. So I'm going to read them out, and thankfully Andy gave me a nice long list and said that I didn't have to read it out, but I'm so nice that I'm going to read it all out. So if you will, pros for wrestling: storylines and athleticism. Cons: predictable nature and talent doesn't always deserve the spot. Looking at you, Roman. Pros for MMA: unpredictable and genuinely exciting, not as brutal as non-fans think. Safer than boxing. Cons: very few stars grow the sport. I love all the fights, but to the outside viewer, who do you cheer for? Another con: UFC fans only wanting blood and head-kicked KOs. See, right there. I think the biggest difference for me is I have been an MMA fan more consistently than a wrestling fan because it's so exciting and relatively new. Wrestling, you kind of know what you're getting, and the moments are few and far between. So, with that said, we have, I think, 4 or 5, 6-ish little topics that we're going to discuss and kind of compare pro wrestling and MMA. So let's get started. I thought a really good place to start would be the legitimacy of it. Obviously, if you talk to any MMA fan who does not like wrestling, they're going to say, as with anyone who doesn't like wrestling, wrestling is fake. Why do you watch it? To which I will reply, Pokemon are fake. Why are you staring at your phone instead of looking at me and having a conversation like a decent human being? But I think that legitimacy is an important deal. I think that they're both obviously legitimate sports and legitimate competitions. But I think where the line in the sand, I guess, that you could draw is the intention of the legitimacy of hurting people. Is obviously in MMA, you're going into a match, you are trying to injure, you are trying to hurt your opponent. You might respect them, you might even like them, you might hate them. That's not really the point, but you're going there to try to beat up your opponent and so that you can win. Wrestling is obviously predetermined, and so if you go out there trying to hurt somebody, you're probably going to get fired from your job. Vinnie Mac is not going to hold with that. And so like I said, it all is on the intent. Brock Lesnar, for example, just fought in the UFC 201, and WWE is deciding to piggyback off that now after almost completely ignoring it in the build-up. Brock Lesnar puts on a Kimura lock on John Cena, and it doesn't do anything. It doesn't legitimately hurt John Cena because Brock Lesnar knows how to do that move without hurting someone. But at the same time, Brock Lesnar can go into a UFC cage and put the Kimura lock on somebody, and he can legitimately break their arm with the exact same hold. It just really depends on how you do that. But at the same time, wrestling has a lot of potential for injury, but that's obviously the result of mistakes. You're not trying to injure somebody, and so I think that's where the big difference is. You can have stiff wrestlers just like an MMA guy. I would not want to get kicked by Shinsuke Nakamura ever. That would hurt a lot. That would probably hurt just as much as getting kicked by any other UFC guy, because the King of Strong Style doesn't hold back. And so to me, yeah, wrestling is fake. Wrestling fans, get over it. It is predetermined. It's not a great choice of words, but that is the way it is. But it is still legitimate. It takes a hell of a lot of athleticism and ability to do this. Matt and I, we could go and wrestle at some indie show, and we could be the tag team champions. Except we couldn't, because we're both not in great shape, and even the worst wrestler in the world would probably wrestle rings around us, pun intended. But yeah, so I think it's a bit unfair for people who say that wrestling isn't real. But at the same time, man, injuries can happen to both. Sid jumping off the second rope and snapping his leg in half, that happened. Anderson Silva kicking a guy in the shin, snapped his leg in half. Both the same injury, both legitimate, but they're just a little bit different in how they're done. Matt, is wrestling legitimate? Is it a legitimate contact fighting sport?
It's funny that you mentioned the conditioning, because as you were talking earlier, I was like, to be a wrestler, you have to be in a pretty good shape. For UFC, you don't have to be in the best shape. My point on that is because I used to watch The Ultimate Fighter, and one of the seasons was Roy Nelson, and he won. So I kind of followed his career a little bit. He's just a fat Southern boy. I mean, plain and simple. He's just fat and Southern. He beat Kimbo Slice in the first round of The Ultimate Fighter. You know how? He physically sat on Kimbo Slice and just hit him in the head because Kimbo couldn't lift himself from the weight of Roy Nelson. That really says it all. Any country boy can come in, any city boy who lifts weights can come in and do this. You don't have to be in the best of shape. People like George St. Pierre, that's an exception to that rule. He's in amazing physical condition. Conor McGregor's in amazing physical condition, but they can just go up against any regular guy on the streets and have a UFC fight because it's just a fight. That's what it is. Wrestling it's like almost like a dance. You have to be in amazing physical condition because you have to have the stamina to go through these 10 to 15 minute matches. You have to keep moving. Not all the hits are real, so you have to learn how to come that close to make it look real. Like you said with the Kimura lock, you have to know how to apply these holds without actually hurting anybody. I feel like a lot more physical prowess put into wrestling as well as mental prowess put into it, because you have to remember, okay, I can't do this or it'll hurt him, I can't do that. You have to always be listening to the next call, you have to be watching the referee, you have to be watching the announce table, because you're getting signals from all three of these ways, and you have to read the crowd. There's just so much that goes into wrestling, and I would say wrestling is legitimate. You have to put it in there. It is sports entertainment, but in the same hand, I would also put UFC in a legitimate category. Just UFC, not all of MMA, because there's different forms of MMA, and MMA itself, just the word, you can go into just street fighting, which isn't a sport. So I would say just UFC in that.
Yeah, and so I think also with maybe the intent of not trying to hurt someone, it leaves you open to doing a lot more. I mean, I'm not trying to say that there's not a ton of different moves you can't do in UFC. There's different types of punches and kicks and submissions and different techniques, ground and pound, submission, all that stuff. But I think it definitely, in professional wrestling, leaves you open to doing more things. You can do a match between Will Ospreay and Ricochet and make Vader hate everything in life by doing these amazing flips and acrobatics and tell a story. And I'm not saying that you're not telling a story in MMA, but that's definitely not the intent of what they're trying to do. And so I think at the same time, there's a lot of safety concerns there, Matt, which is something that you brought up. So why don't you kind of discuss a little bit what you thought about the safety aspect between the two different sports?
Oh, the safety aspect. Yeah, I feel like UFC is a much safer sport than wrestling, and I say that for two reasons. The first one is the current active wrestlers versus current active UFC people. I could be dead wrong on this, but if I remember correctly, more people have died in the wrestling ring than have died in the UFC octagon. So right there, that's a huge thing. There's just more mess ups in wrestling. You go against a stiff guy like Ryback or like Bill Goldberg, and there's a chance you can get injured right off the bat. They just don't know their own power. Boom, you're injured. Or you freak accidents like Samoa Joe and Tyson Kidd. Tyson Kidd almost died. His wrestling career is basically over. You don't have that in UFC because they go at each other, but they're not going to kill each other. They know their limits. There's a referee there to pull them off. The worst you're going to do is knock the guy out for a few seconds. And then for the second point I say that is afterwards. We all seen with Jake the Snake Roberts and others. When you're in the spotlight in wrestling, you're needed. People need you for entertainment. The company needs you because you bring in money. This and that. You're just needed. So after you retire, you don't feel needed. You feel like your self-worth goes down. We've seen it happen with all these different people. And Ric Flair needs to be in the spotlight now with his daughter. He's always with WWE. He can't just fade away, And with UFC, you don't see that happen. You don't see ex-UFC people go into depression. You don't see them try to kill themselves. You don't see this and that. They're healthy people teaching younger kids how to train, how to be UFC fighters. They're on ESPN talking about UFC. It's just a healthier lifestyle. I think wrestling can really take its toll mentally and physically. I heard a doctor say when I was reading an article about wrestling that every match you're in that's over 10 minutes, it's like putting your body through an extreme car crash. And you just have to imagine, what do the bodies look like of people like Jeff Hardy, people like AJ Styles, people like Christian Edge. They have to be feeling it every single morning when they roll out of bed.
Yeah, obviously I'm not going to say that WWE is less safe than UFC. There's a difference between legitimately getting punched in the face as hard as somebody can. For example, Mark Hunt, who just faced Brock Lesnar, I brushed up a little bit on Mark Hunt before I watched UFC 200 just because I kind of wanted to get an idea of who this guy was. I kind of wanted to get a better feel for the entire event. Because I haven't actually ever watched a full UFC event before, and this is my first time. But Mark Hunt is the master of the walk-off KO. He punches you once, you fall to the ground, and he walks off. He legitimately knocks you out. But, like you said, I think it's the lifestyle of wrestling that is less safe. Obviously, if you're a UFC fighter, you're legitimately fighting someone. You're legitimately going out and getting beat up, and you're legitimately beating somebody up. And so you're not going to have a fight four nights a week, 2 matches every night, like wrestlers, or how they even used to do 7 nights a week. You're going to wrestle once or twice or maybe even 3 times a year because you need that time to prepare for the fight. You need that time to recover from your injuries. So just on a baseline, UFC is definitely less safe because you're legitimately trying to hurt. But like you said, where the bigger injuries occur are in wrestling and where something gets messed up. Seth Rollins tearing his ACL just in a match. It's a freak thing that happened. It didn't mean to happen. Nobody did anything wrong. But those bigger injuries happen. And yeah, like you said, I think it's the lifestyle of wrestling that makes it a lot worse. Jake the Snake Roberts, you're on the road 300 nights a year, driving in cars. And so a lot of professional wrestlers, they take the pills, they take the alcohol, they take the drugs, And that I'm not saying that doesn't happen in the UFC. It very well might happen. But one, I don't know about it if it does. Two, it's not publicized as much. And three, I honestly just don't think it happens as much because you're not working every night of the week. You're not asked to be going to autograph signings every day. You're not being ambushed at 2 in the morning in the airports, and then threatening someone when they call you Phil. We'll get to that. But yeah, I think safety is a big issue, and obviously WWE in professional wrestling as a whole, they're trying to be as safe as possible. Everything they do, they keep safety in mind first. But sometimes that doesn't always happen, and that's where the injuries occur. Whereas in UFC, the injuries are meant to happen, and they're going to happen. But like you said, they might not always be severe. They can be severe. Things can happen that will end a fighter's career in one night. But that's just one of the different aspects of the two different sports. And so as we discuss this, we're going to move on to the next topic, and that is entertainment. And I think this is the topic where I have the most stuff written down. I never really write a whole heck of a lot of notes, but I have this whole page and the back of here as well, just of notes, because I wanted to make sure that we try to cover this thing completely so that we're not just harping on one issue and kind of going back to the same issue over and over. And so for me, UFC is an entertainment company. WWE is an entertainment company. TNA is an entertainment company. Lucha Underground is an entertainment company. Bellator is an entertainment company. These companies are out there. They're made to entertain the people, to have something to do, to distract you from whatever the hell is going on in your life. They're there to distract you and to have a good time and to make a lot of money while doing it. As you said, UFC just got sold for $4 billion. Vince McMahon is a millionaire who should be a billionaire. And so they're in this for entertainment. But once again, I'm finding the difference here. The professional wrestlers go into the ring to entertain the public. That's why they're there. Obviously, some go there to make money. Brock Lesnar. Some of them go because that they love wrestling. They've loved it for their entire lives, like a Sasha Banks. And so the difference for me is an MMA fighter, a Bellator fighter, a UFC fighter. They're not going in there to put on a fantastic fight. They're going in there to win. Professional wrestlers don't do that. It's predetermined. You're not going to win every match unless you're John Cena. And so to me, that's the difference, is the competitors in the ring and what their intentions are, is where the difference is. MMA is very entertaining. I agree. I love watching a good fight, people beating up each other, a good, well thought out fight. It's very entertaining to me. But as I said before, wrestling, you're open to a lot more. Oh, cool. This video is popping up to disrupt our video. We appreciate that. Side note, if anybody knows a better streaming video site that we can use to record these, please let us know, because I'm really not a big fan of Uvu that we use. Like things like that, videos pop up. But anywho, so the fighters aren't going out there to entertain. Wrestlers are going out there to entertain. Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens go out there every night and beat the heck out of each other to entertain the public, and because they love doing it. Two fighters go out there, they're trying to win, because if you win, that's how you make money. And so I think that's where the big difference is. Matt, do you have anything to say on this? I know I have a lot more. I think this is a subject that we can delve pretty deeply into.
The entertainment factor. I feel like WWE or UFC has a higher chance to be a better entertainment factor because everything's live, like you said. It's not predetermined. You don't know who's going to win. I mean, there's obvious underdogs in every single match in every single sport. So the underdog could always win. It has the chance to. But when you look at WWE versus UFC in that fact, with the main event of any pay-per-view, the main event's going to be over 10 minutes. It's going to be close to 15, 20 minutes, sometimes 30 minutes. And you're guaranteed that time. So you feel safe about spending that money. I'm going to get this time. It's going to be like 4 hours long. No matter what happens, there's going to be a good amount for each match. In UFC, and I have quite a few friends on my Facebook feed that watch UFC, and there's been a few, I don't know what you call them in the UFC, like the UFC 200, UFC 196, whatever it is. They're pay-per-views. They're not comfortable spending the $50. They're like, you know what, let's just go somewhere free to watch it. It's like Buffalo Wild Wings. Because there's these fights where like, yeah, this guy's probably just going to knock him out in like 10 seconds, You're never sure of how long it's going to be. And I think that builds in the entertainment factor because people are safer spending their money on the WWE pay-per-view where they're guaranteed the time. When UFC, they can't guarantee it. Dana White can't go up to Brock Lesnar and say, hey, toy around with the guy for a couple minutes because people paid to watch this. No, Dana White's going to say, make him bleed, make him hurt because people paid to watch this and they want to see this guy get beaten down,
Yeah, that was my next point exactly. That's one of the big reasons I never really got into MMA. I can't justify spending that kind of money when I don't know if it's going to be worth it. I'm not going to pay $54.99 or whatever the ridiculous price for pay-per-view is now. When Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo fight for 13 seconds in the main event, no way I would ask for a refund immediately if I paid for that. Yes, it's very exciting, and that's a very entertaining 13 seconds, but it's not worth my time. Like you said, I can go even a good wrestling match or a bad wrestling match or a bad Raw. Either way, its aim is to entertain, and so you're going to be entertained to some extent of any wrestling show or any wrestling match. I mean, if you get a John Cena match, or here, let's take the worst of the worst, a Randy Orton against Sheamus match. We all know how terrible and boring it is, but we're still getting time invested into the price that we paid, the $9.99. Whereas, Ronda Rousey going there and beating up women in 15 seconds, you're not getting that same money investment for the time, or the same time investment you spent that money for. And so I think that's where the big issue with me is there, and probably a lot of other people feel the same way. A lot of other people don't feel the same way, obviously. They still spend the money regardless. I think UFC has a Fight Pass thing now, which I believe is similar to the WWE Network, where you can get all their pay-per-views and watch previous pay-per-views. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But yeah, like to me, just watching two guys, like I said earlier, just circling around each other, feeling each other out, trying to get the win. Obviously, they're like, if we could know what's going on inside their head and know what they're thinking while it's happening, it would be extremely entertaining. But just watch two guys circling each other and kind of pawing and feeling at each other is not entertaining. When you have Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, Sami Zayn doing a suicide dive over the top rope and doing flips, and Kevin Owens yelling at Michael Cole throughout the whole match, and just all these different elements that add to the wrestling. It's not the wrestling part that is as entertaining sometimes. Don't be wrong, it definitely is. Any Kevin Owens Sami Zayn match, as we all know, is very entertaining and is very technically sound match. But there's so many different parts of that. Seth Rollins is going to go out there anytime, and he's going to entertain you, whether he has a match or whether he has the Rollins Report, which he did last night, which was pretty entertaining. And that, to me, that's not to say that there are no interesting personalities in MMA. Conor McGregor, obviously, he's one of the biggest trash talkers. He's one of the biggest stars in UFC right now. One of that is because he's a badass and he can beat the living hell out of people. The other part is that he talks a big game. He's a personality. He has charisma. There's other guys like Chael Sonnen and Anderson Silva who are big trash talkers, and they make fights interesting in the press conferences and stuff beforehand that help get people, into the product. But that's just a side characteristic. In WWE, you need to have charisma. Wrestling is very important, but the same amount, you also have to have charisma. You have to have that it factor. I mean, yeah, there's a lot of different things. Is there anything else that you've got on the entertainment aspect of these two companies?
You can branch out a little bit and say, like you were talking about who has charisma, who doesn't. There are more people in WWE that can branch out into other things. You look at Stone Cold, you look at The Rock, you look at John Cena, you look at all these guys, they can go into movies. John Cena go into and release like 2 rap albums, There are all these things that they could just branch out and do. I feel like WWE superstars are more well-rounded as a whole with their entertainment factor. They go into music, they go into movies. In a few cases, they go into the UFC. They're just all over the place. UFC guys mainly just do UFC, and that's it.
I think even better, Macho Man Randy Savage's rap album is the rap album that we need to be talking about. But yeah, there's just so many things, and that we're not to say that obviously, like I said, there's not everybody in WWE has charisma. Roman Reigns, and not everybody who's a UFC fighter does not have charisma. It's a weird sentence, but there's definitely entertaining factors of both. And it really just depends on the personal preference of each person. Some people like to be told stories and to have different things that they can go to wrestling. I think that's why wrestling fans like wrestling. It's for the stories and the emotion that gets put into it. Whereas UFC, it's about going there and beating the crap out of each other. And that definitely has its place. It's definitely entertaining. And so I think we've kind of got through the basic points. Let's talk over the main focus of this comparison, the main person who has done the crossover from UFC and the WWE, and that is Brock Lesnar. Obviously, others have done it. Others have tried. Bobby Lashley, I think, had a terrible stint in some no-name promotion for MMA. Ken Shamrock has done decently good job in UFC and other promotions. But nobody has done it like Brock Lesnar. I'll tell you now, I've said this on the show a billion times, I don't care for Brock Lesnar as a wrestler. I'm not really entertained by anything he does. He does, he does the suplex, he does the F5, and that's the whole match. That's not entertaining to me. But a lot of everything that I saw on Twitter after Brock Lesnar beat Mark Hunt via decision was that, this professional wrestler came in and beat up a legitimate UFC guy. And while I definitely do agree with that, Brock Lesnar is a professional wrestler. Mark Hunt is a legitimate bad guy. That guy will mess you up. And so everyone's like, even I even said that before, how might UFC be feeling? How might fans be feeling that this fake professional wrestler guy is coming in there to save their pay-per-view and to be the headline of their pay-per-view? Because during Brock Lesnar's first stint in UFC, that was one of the big things. The fans hated him in UFC because he was some fake wrestling guy, and he didn't give a crap about them. This doesn't really give a crap about anybody, but either after he won the title or after his first win, he just goes and flips off the crowd. And so, yes, a professional wrestler did come in and beat one of the top 10 heavyweights in the UFC. But at the same time, Brock Lesnar is not your typical professional wrestler. He is an absolute beast of a human being, might be one of the best pure athletes in combat sport, period. And so if you can tell me that you can take John Cena, or you can take AJ Styles, or you can take Jimmy Uso, or you can take Becky Lynch, any of these people, and put them in a UFC cage, an octagon, and tell me that they're going to be successful. They might be successful, but I think they have a lot less chance of being successful than Brock Lesnar. And I think that a UFC or MMA fighter coming into WWE has a better chance of being successful in WWE than a WWE person going over and try to become a legitimate fighter. Because it is legitimate fighting. It is real punches. It is a lot of real training. Yes, or being a professional wrestler will help. That conditioning, it won't be a problem. You'll be able to go the full 3 rounds, the full 5 rounds, whatever it may be. But not everyone is Brock Lesnar. And Brock Lesnar proved how good of an athlete he is just off of the month and a half of training he had to do for this fight to prepare and to come out and to be the beast that we know he is. I just don't think that all wrestlers are really cut out for this. I'm looking at you, Mr. Punk. But like I said, I think that Brock Lesnar is a special case. That's not to say that wrestlers can't be fighters, not to say that fighters can't be wrestlers. I'm saying it's a very difficult thing to do because as much as these two sports are similar, there are so many differences. It takes a different kind of skills to be successful in each one.
Some good points there.
I assume there's going to be a rebuttal from you coming.
There is. Brock Lesnar, yeah, he went into WWE, went into UFC, and he's been in the NFL. He is the mega athlete. There's no one really to even compare. We've had some people, like you said, Ken Shamrock from UFC, WWE, Dave Bautista, Bobby Lashley. I'm sure there's 1 or 2 others. But Brock Lesnar is the first one to really have a full-time WWE career, then go out and have a full-time UFC career, come back, do the WWE thing, and now he's going to do both at the same time, it seems. He's just really the standard that no one can compare to. I feel like WWE has a better chance. You can take more people from WWE, put them into UFC, and they'd have a better time than taking UFC people and put them in WWE. I feel like if we take them from UFC, put them in WWE, they're going to have a hard time learning how to act and how to, just come close enough to hurting them, and selling moves and doing this and doing that. We've seen a lot of people from WWE who have a history in mixed martial arts in some way, karate, jiu-jitsu, this, that. You look at Bobby Lashley, he was a former collegiate champion. CM Punk has training in jiu-jitsu. Brock Lesnar was trained. You have all these people that have trained, so they have tools they could build on, they could train towards, this and that. But overall, I feel like UFC can overtake wrestling in the long run. If we're talking about business aspects, if we're talking about this and that, they're just sold. WWE, their ratings are slowly going down with this future movement, which is all fine and dandy. You can take the belt off of Dean Ambrose, you can put it back on John Cena, you can put it back on Randy Orton because ratings will go up. But they're just gaining age, both of them, all these other people. And if the crowd's not going to buy into it, they'll buy into the UFC aspect because you have the best group of, I guess you'd say, self-promoters in the business now with John Jones getting all this attention. It guarantees bad attention, but he's getting attention. You have Conor McGregor, which I would put him on the level of, like, the top talent. Like, he right now is the Michael Jordan of MMA. He is getting it out there. He's getting the news out there. He's always in the news. He's gaining attention towards the UFC that the UFC desperately needed. And that's going to be amazing for them in the long run.
Yeah, I think I think once again, like, these sports complement each other and contrast really well, which I think we've done a pretty good job of explaining so far. Not all wrestlers can go out and be MMA fighters. Not all MMA fighters can go off and be professional wrestlers. WWE is obviously very interested in trying to get some UFC fighters. Obviously, there's been tons of rumors of Ronda Rousey or Conor McGregor or Paige Van Zant coming into WWE and doing something with them. But at the same time, going the other direction, wrestlers may or may not be able to go in to Ultimate Fighting into MMA and be successful. They might not. You know, some fighters have charisma, some don't. Some wrestlers have charisma, some are Roman Reigns, and so I think we've hit this pretty much as well as we can. And so just to kind of keep on Brock Lesnar a little bit, do you think he's going to stay in WWE? Do you think he's going to go to UFC? Do you think he's going to do both at the same time? What do you think he wants to do? Kind of all those packed into one big giant 4-part question there. What do you got?
He wants to follow the money is what he wants to do. He wants to go anywhere who's going to cut him the biggest check. And right now, Vince McMahon's in the position to cut him a bigger check than UFC. So I feel like he's going to stay in WWE. He'll probably do a few more UFC fights until he gets rocked. Until he gets that loss in UFC, will he realize, hey, it's much safer if I just have this part-time schedule in WWE, play a few fights, and just do my ranching business. He has a family. He's getting older, so he's not going to want to take too many physical trials in UFC. His schedule in WWE is very limited, and no one is he going to face in WWE is going to actually hurt him. He throws people around like rag dolls. He's in no position to even get injured. The closest to injuring he has gotten since coming back to WWE is the Extreme Rules match against Dean Ambrose, and that's saying a lot. So he's going to stay in WWE for sure. He might have three fights left tops in him for UFC.
Yeah, this is obviously all up to Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon owns the contract to Brock Lesnar right now, and so whatever Vinnie Mac says goes. I think this victory at UFC 200 has made Vince more open to allowing Brock to maybe do some more fights, to maybe have a mutually beneficial relationship going with Dana White and with the UFC to maybe get a Ronda Rousey for WrestleMania or Conor McGregor. But I think Brock's win definitely improves the image of professional wrestling and WWE, even though he is, in a class all his own. It does definitely improve their look. But honestly, RTM talked about this on their show, how happy and how relaxed Brock Lesnar looked in the lead up to this fight. And even after this fight, it was so weird to me after the fight. He talked about how we need to support those who defend us, the policemen and the soldiers. We need to support them, and how we need to come together and stop all this violence, which just seemed like the most un-Brock Lesnar thing to do. I get that in WWE, that's a character he's portraying, but he never really seemed like the kind of guy who would go out and say something like that. He's kind of always seemed like this no-nonsense guy, but he definitely seemed more relaxed. He definitely seemed like he was having a lot more fun in the UFC. So I think if trying to think like Brock Lesnar, I feel like he probably, if he could have it his way, he would not do WWE anymore. He would go back to be doing UFC full time, but that's not an option unless Vince McMahon okays that, unless Vince lets him out of the contract. Because I believe he signed a 2 or 3 year deal with WWE prior to WrestleMania. And so, once again, I'm not a big fan of Brock Lesnar. To me at this point, what is there left for Brock Lesnar to do in WWE? He's faced John Cena, he's faced Triple H, he's faced Roman Reigns, Dean Ambrose, and Seth Rollins. He's going on to face Randy Orton, who he's only had a few, 1 or 2 televised matches with, and that was way back before either of them were big stars. And so to me, what does Brock Lesnar have left, 1, to prove, and 2, just to even do? I'm not really entertained by the man in WWE. Seeing a crap ton of suplexes over and over is not entertaining to me. I can get on my video game and I can click the buttons and make Brock Lesnar do the same thing. It's very video game-esque to me. And for people who complain about Roman Reigns not having a ton of moves, and people who complain about John Cena not having a ton of moves, and then cheer on Brock Lesnar for beating up people, I don't really get that at all. But I think at the same time, Lesnar doesn't really want to be doing WWE. It's not his love. It's not his passion. UFC seems to be that. And so obviously I think if he had his way, that's what he'd be doing. But that's not up to him. And so our last little discussion point here, we brought him up. Matthew, question? Yes.
Well, comment about your last point. I feel like he does have something left to do in WWE, and that's if he wants to get out of this contract, tell Vince, be like, hey, listen, I'll wrestle the rest of the year, and I'll just put over guys if you let me out by next WrestleMania to do UFC. I feel like it'd be great for careers like Kevin Owens, careers like Rusev, to get momentum being pushed over Brock Lesnar, beat him in rivalries, this and that. Because Brock Lesnar's in a position now, like, he doesn't want to be there. Okay, put over 2-3 guys for the future, you're gone. Because all you need is those couple wins over Brock Lesnar that legitimizes you into superstardom. It's bigger than a win over John Cena, really.
I agree. That would be really good. Same time, I don't know if he'd be willing to do that. He might not. But yeah, that's a really good point. I would love to see him put over some guys like a Kevin Owens. That would be absolutely amazing for his career. But with all that said, we go to this last little discussion point. We mentioned him previously, and so I think we have enough time to give him a little bit of a chat. And that is one Cookie Monster Punk. So if you haven't been following any news at all, CM Punk left the WWE what seems like 400 years ago and has been training to be in the UFC and has kept pushing back fights and pushing back fights. And I think he officially has a fight at UFC 202 against Mickey Gall. Once again, Matt, another one of your favorite guys. So what do you think about CM Punk in MMA? Do you think he's going to be successful? Do you see is there something behind why his fights keep getting pushed back? What do you think about the whole thing?
I feel pretty good about his chances. I think his fights kept getting pushed back because he's having a lot of back problems. But once again, he's not going up against an A-plus type guy. His first fight's not against Conor McGregor, you know? It's against a lower card guy, someone he does kind of have a chance against. He's already had a background, and I believe it's jiu-jitsu. He's been training in UFC for 2-3 years now. He has that training under his belt. He has some sparring matches. He has that training before. So it's really, he has the tools now to be a UFC talent. It's up to him to see if he uses it. He has a lot of pent-up aggression we've all seen. I feel like his chances are pretty good. I think he's going to land a few hits. I'm not sure if he'll win it, but by me saying I feel his chances are good, I feel his chances are good to have a good showing. I don't think he's going to be a joke his first time out. I feel like his UFC career will be limited to maybe 2-3 fights because he is older. I think he just wants to get a few fights out of him. He wants to see what it's like to be in the UFC. I don't think his passion is UFC, though.
Yeah, I really think about with him, it's just that he wants to prove it to himself to see if he can go out and do that. And that's a very noble cause, and I honestly, as much as I, take the crap out of CM Punk all the time, I do wish him the best. With that said, I will laugh a lot if he gets knocked out in like the first round. But yeah, it has to suck for him, for the fact that Brock Lesnar came back to WWE, won the World Heavyweight title, lost the World Heavyweight title, went back to UFC, fought, and won, all within the time that CM Punk has been gone from the WWE. Brock Lesnar has been able to do all this in both companies And that I feel like that might be a sour point with CM Punk. And honestly, I assume he's thought of this. How could he have not thought of this? But he has to be, whether he wins or loses, or even in the pre-fight interviews, he has to be expecting tons of questions about being a professional wrestler and if he's ready for this. And, you know, if he loses, they might questions be like, oh, well, are you going to go back to professional wrestling? Are you going to go back to that fake sport? And we all know that CM Punk does not like being asked questions about wrestling. He doesn't really like talking about it unless he is there to just give a jab himself. And so I'm not sure if that'll be good for him. I agree. I don't think he has a lot of fights in him. Like I said, I think he just wants to do this to see if...
Hey!
Okay,
this brawl just happening here.
So we've got a nice brawl for all going on there. Oh, speaking of brawl for all, here's something else I wanted to bring up that I forgot to. We'll come back to CM Punk in a minute. So I commented this on RTM's video about UFC, and I wanted to bring this up because I thought it was funny. So with Vince McMahon seeming to be more into MMA, because apparently previously he thought that it was just barbaric fighting. He did not like it at all. But apparently now that he's potentially able to make some more money off of it with Brock Lesnar, he's into it a little bit more. And so I thought that maybe we're going to get another Brawl for All like we did before WrestleMania 15, where everyone did legitimate boxing with a chance to face Butterbean at WrestleMania, which Bart Gunn got knocked out very quickly and is a very bad thing. So maybe we're going to be getting another Brawl for All where wrestlers legitimately fight each other coming up to WrestleMania, and the winner gets to face Ronda Rousey or something like that. I think that's something that they would do. They would give Dolph Ziggler a bunch of wins in these UFC type legitimate fights, and then have him face Ronda Rousey and get the living crap beat out of him. But that was just some random idea I had. May or may not be funny. But yeah, CM Punk, I don't think he's going to win. But I don't, he doesn't seem like the kind of person where one loss is going to knock him down to where you say, I'm not going to do this anymore. He's obviously a very proud person, as most of you weird people from Chicago are. He's a very proud person. I don't think getting knocked down once is going to keep him down. I think he's going to keep coming back. And so I do wish him the best of luck, but at the same time, I'm going to laugh at him if he gets knocked out. And if he wins, I'll definitely eat my words and say that he trained hard and deserved this, but I think it's a very difficult thing. And I think these fights getting pushed back are a little suspicious. Obviously, I think you're right. It has something to do with his injury. But it seems to me that there might be a little bit more with it. But that's really all I have. Do you have any last-minute thoughts on wrestling, last-minute thoughts on MMA to tell everybody about?
No, not really. Right. I don't know if I mentioned it, but I was doing the research, and there's more. If you're not a follower of WWE, there's more people that you will know who's in WWE, like Ric Flair, John Cena, Randy Orton. The list goes on and on. And I could look at UFC and think of like 5 people, and I don't follow UFC. So there's more recognizable names from WWE than UFC.
Yeah, I think that definitely goes back to that mainstream attention that you talked about, where wrestlers can kind of do more. They can go make movies. Hulk Hogan can go do the Three Ninjas movie, and John Cena can do a rap album, and this yada yada yada. Host the ESPYs tonight. I think that's it. I hope everyone enjoyed our discussions on MMA and WWE. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Make sure you leave a comment below to tell us your thoughts and all that stuff. But I think we have reached the end of the show. Matt, do you have any announcements for us?
Any announcements? Yes, I do. Coming up soon, we're going to do a pretty fun show. We've had a lot of time to think about it. We've had a lot of time to put some notes together on what we feel is best for this. We're going to be talking about some ladder matches that you may have forgotten. We're going to be talking about TLC matches. We're not going to be talking about Money in the Bank matches. We're going to be talking about classic, old school Smash Mouth ladder matches that have brought you a world that you may have forgotten about. And then after that, probably in the next like a week or so, I'd say we're going to be doing another show where it's going to get ugly. We're going to be yelling at each other, calling each other names, because we feel pretty passionate about this. We've talked about it a lot. We have a lot of notes on this, even more so than the ladder match. We're talking about who's the face of the company. Is it going to be Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, or Roman Reigns? We're going to talk about that. So stay tuned. It's going to get It's going to get rowdy. It's going to get Ronda Rousey. Boom.
Nice
UFC, WWE connected.
Spoiler alert, it's not Roman Reigns. Okay, so that has been Locker Talk episode 54. And we end you, as we always do, with our hashtag of the week. And so our special hashtag for this week for our new number one contender for the United States Championship, hashtag woo, woo, woo. You know it. And we will see you next time.